I know I have talked about this book many times by now. I think I've made two separate videos about this book right here, The War on Science by Lawrence Krauss. But all the people who contributed to this book are still saying stupid things. And I feel like, all right, well, I feel like I have to respond to this stuff. So I will post links to my earlier videos about this stupid book in the show notes, in the description below. But basically, if you're not familiar, this is a book that recently came out. It's edited by the scientist Lawrence Krauss, and it's called The War on Science. And let me go back to the title here. It says 39 renowned scientists and scholars speak out about the current threats to free speech, open inquiry, and the scientific process. So this whole book is about the war on science. And it includes Richard Dawkins and Jerry Coyne, Peter Boghossian, Steven Pinker, and for some reason, Jordan Peterson. Because why would you be in a book if Jordan Peterson were contributing to it? But the point I've made in my previous videos is if you were going to write a book called The War on Science in 2025, what would you write about? Because right now, Donald Trump is dismantling like our science infrastructure in the country. He is stripping funding from universities that do basic vital research. He is appointing conspiracy theorists like RFK Jr. to be in charge of our nation's health. He is defunding the National Institutes of Health. He's denying climate change, etc. So what does this book focus on? Wokeness, Black people, DEI. These are the real war fighters that are trying to destroy science in the country. Like it's an entire book about the problem with wokeness. And it's published, by the way, by a right-wing publisher. So that's how seriously you should take this book. So anyway, I've written about this before. I've said plenty about this. I did want to point out a couple things that have happened since the last time I talked about it. I really enjoyed this piece in New York Magazine by Sarah Jones, who said there are nearly 40 chapters in the War on Science, all pockmarked by omissions, misrepresentations, and sometimes obvious lies. Each section of the anthology addresses a different facet of the woke threat to reason, but a few common obsessions emerge: genitals and what people do with them, Israel, DEI, and various professional insults. It's all here. Boomer Facebook on every page. There you go. Love that. She also pointed out, and I think correctly so here, here we go. The writers are too caught up in their resentment to acknowledge reality. They do not grasp their own role in the global rise of the illiberal right. They want to debate as long as they dictate the terms. And what they are saying by that is when you are saying the problem, the war on science is being waged by wokeness, by people who care too much about trans people or giving opportunities to racial minorities because they've had it too good for too long. When you focus on that, you are harming science, not helping it, they say. When you say that as a scientist, what do you think you are doing to the right-wing anti-science people, the science deniers out there? You are just giving them fodder. How many times have we now heard Christian preachers and conservative columnists say, you know who else doesn't like trans people? Richard Dawkins, the atheist. We disagree on a lot of things, but on trans people, even Richard Dawkins is with us. And that's what they're doing with these people when it comes to science. Because you have creationists, you have right-wing anti-climate people who are like, you know who else agrees with us that climate change or that we shouldn't care about this because there are real bigger problems elsewhere? It's all of these dudes. So like, yeah, they're making life worse for people who actually care about science. This is a total side note, but I have tried desperately over the past couple of weeks to know, because this book has been out for 1 month now or so. I want to know how many copies of this book are sold. Somewhere out here, watching this video maybe, is either an author or an agent or a book publisher who has access to that kind of information, I am begging you, send me an email. I'll keep you anonymous. I want to know how many copies of this book have sold, because I want to know if like 12 copies have sold, because I don't think it's a bestseller. So what's the answer? I'm dying to know. Someone has to know. Get me that answer. Anyway, I would also point out the reason I wanted to bring this up today, because I've said all of this before already in previous videos, but the reason I want to bring it up here is because since the book has come out over the past month, a lot of the people who contributed to this book have been criticized by people who are like, you wrote a book on the war on science and you didn't focus at all on what Donald Trump is doing. How do you not go after Trump in a book on the war on science? How are trans people your enemy right now? Do you know what is happening in your field? And all of them are now giving basically the same explanations everywhere they go. And I'll start with Lawrence Krauss himself. He wrote an article for Reason magazine. Check this out. America's two-front, a war on science. Let's see how he opens this piece. There is currently a two-pronged attack on higher education, research, and scholarship in the United States. Activists inside universities have hijacked many administrative functions, and significant reform is needed to ensure free speech, open inquiry, and the integrity of scholarship. But, the Trump administration has used this fact to launch what maybe, I'm not sure, but it might be a more dangerous direct attack on university science and research infrastructure across the nation. So you guys, trans people annoy Lawrence Krauss, but it's possible that Donald Trump is also doing some bad stuff. Both sides. You've got to be shitting me. Who's doing more damage to science? The guy who is single-handedly just saying, I'm not giving billions of dollars for research that Congress already allocated to this university because I don't like them because they're Ivy Leagues? Or is it people who are like, we should try giving STEM scholarships to underrepresented groups? He's like, both sides are bad. This is how dumb these people are. In his head, Trump decimating our nation's scientific infrastructure may be a more dangerous direct attack on science. By the way, he has also said this over and over. I want to show you some of these Lawrence Krauss tweets because, again, just stupid. Look at this. This is in response to someone. The book was written before Trump was elected, but we have added little bits, acknowledging what is going on. But there is a difference. One is an external threat, and we are focusing on threats from within. But their title is not the war on science. That doesn't really matter right now because we got bigger problems. You guys, the book was written before Trump was in office. It was written before the inauguration. So how would we know he was going to do bad things? As another writer said, it seems like Lawrence Krauss was in a coma for 8 years if you don't know what Trump was going to do. I am not a scientist. I knew exactly what Trump would do. Here's Lawrence Krauss again. It was written before Trump, but in fact, we added some addenda on this. You guys, he put in a little afterword where he's like, yeah, everything we said. Trump is bad too. There's one more right here. This is him promoting that Reason magazine piece I just showed you. My newest piece on the two-pronged war on science just appeared in Reason magazine. Yes, it is two-pronged. The new book, which was written before Trump was elected, deals with the first. But an external attack has occurred that may be more damaging. Like, seriously, how are you a science communicator who has no idea what the Trump administration planned to do with science if they got into office again? By the way, Krauss went on the Federalist podcast to promote his book. The Federalist, another right-wing website, because again, this is his audience now. It's just right-wing crazy people and not actual people who care about science, because they know they're not playing to an audience of scientists. So another guy who contributed to the book, his name is Martin Boudry. This is what he wrote on Substack. Check this out. When there is rampant crime in the neighborhood and the community leaders look the other way, it creates the perfect opening for a sweeping police crackdown. In the same vein, the incursions of left-wing ideology in universities and other academic institutions have helped to turn them into prime targets for the populist right. If you turn universities and academic journals into partisan lobby groups, don't be shocked when you find yourself in the political crosshairs. And we'll pause there for a second. He's basically saying, hey, liberals on college campuses, do you not like what the Trump administration is doing to you? Well, what were you wearing? What did you do to make them so mad at you? This is your fault. You shouldn't have been annoying and accuse half of the people contributing to this book of sexual harassment, or at least Lawrence Krauss of Arizona. He's basically blaming people on the left for what Trump is doing, which again is stupid, because anyone who has followed what conservative politics have been like for the past decade or 7, or you have followed Donald Trump over the past decade, you knew he's been waging a war against science for years. The right has been waging a war against science for decades. They just never had an entire administration who was like, yeah, do whatever you want, we'll support you. And now they can get away with it. That's the difference. But they've been broadcasting what they wish they could do with science forever. So what is this idea that, hey, liberals who annoy me, you're the problem here. It's your fault that they're mad at you. No, the Trump administration was going to do this no matter what. It's like Trump administration going after universities claiming they are anti-Semitic because they allow protests about Gaza. It's like, no, he was always going to find some reason to go after colleges he doesn't like. The right hates higher education, even though all of them went to like Yale or Harvard Law School. They hate higher education. They want to decimate the most powerful education institutions out there. The right hates public schools. That's why they want to give money to private religious schools. They're always going to make up a reason to say we can't have public schools have this money. We can't give research funding to private institutions. You think they need a reason? No, they don't. They're going to do that anyway. And you think they're serious when they say, well, we have to take money away from you because, you know, progressives are doing something we don't like. How dumb do you have to be to think it's the left's fault for what the right is doing right now? But again, this is what Boudry said later on. Yes, it is true that Trump's assault on universities is both reprehensible and unconstitutional. That is, professed concern about anti-Semitism is just a pretext for owning the libs, and that his sudden embrace of academic freedom is disingenuous. Oh my God, this guy kind of gets it. He just wants to swap one orthodoxy for another. But that is exactly why we should have cleaned our Augean stable, I don't know how to pronounce the word, before it came to this. No, he had it. He was so close, and then he threw it all away. This has nothing to do with the left. The right was always going to do this, and how dumb do you have to be to blame the left for having anything to do with this? There's one other thing he wrote that I wanted you to laugh at with me. Check this out. This is from the same dude Substack. And it's the same statement that Lawrence Krauss had pretty much. In the time between the writing and publishing of our book, however, Donald Trump was reelected as president and started to launch a very different kind of war on science of his own, cracking down on prestigious institutions, slashing research funding on anything that smacks of progressive causes, and threatening scientific journals to scrap DEI initiatives and reinstate strict meritocracy. So, this is again, he's so close to getting it. So, is it true, as the kids say, that our book didn't age well, becoming cringeworthy and out of touch even before it hits the shelves? How could we have been so oblivious to the looming right-wing assault on science while we were preoccupied with left-wing critiques? And then his answer is, well, it's your fault, the left. You annoyed us. And so the right's mad about it. It's your fault. Again, what were you wearing? What did you do that made him hit you? It's just that argument. Again, it never occurs to these people that the right has been wanting to dismantle the scientific establishment forever. They've been fantasizing about it for decades. They've been broadcasting it for decades. They just never had the total power to get away with it until now, because the entire Republican Party in office doesn't want to fight them. And they're just bending over backwards to let Robert F. Kennedy Jr. do whatever he wants. And they're not going to say Trump is doing anything bad because it's a cult. Like, wokeness is not the problem. Wokeness is just the Republican scapegoat for doing whatever it is they wanted to do anyway. I want to show you another one from Jerry Coyne, because he said he's been getting a lot of shit for this, which he totally deserves. But this is the argument he made on his website, saying the book came together before Trump was elected. This is what he said. This book was put together before Trump began his assault on universities by punishing science grantees and by appointing people like RFK Jr. to science positions. I expected that after this unpredictable bout of executive branch bullying, there would be some wokesters who adopted a whataboutery stance, saying this book largely comprises attacks on how the progressive left wing is eroding science. But Trump is doing much more damage from the right. And right now, that is indeed the case. We are right. But this is the dumbest thing, I swear to you, I have read in a long time. Jerry Coyne is not just a PhD scientist. He's written genuinely good books about science. But look at what he says here. Right now, that is indeed the case. But Trump will be gone in a bit over 3 years. And I expect that when Democrats take over, fingers crossed, the government will cut back strongly on interfering in the funding and production. The effect of the right on science, then, will probably be more temporary. In contrast, that from the left will last a lot longer. For progressive professors who believe in nonsense like a spectrum of sex and animals will teach this nonsense to their students, and thus it will pass among academic generations. We simply cannot sit by and let progressives distort science in the cause of ideology, regardless of what the right is doing. Oh my God. First of all, as someone who follows politics, the idea that Trump is going to be gone in 3 years is wishful thinking. I mean, one, Trump is not going to leave office if he is able to stay. Again, what do you think is going to stop him from staying in office if he wants? The Constitution? It's not doing us much good right now. But second, even if Trump leaves, why wouldn't another Republican just take his spot? You think Democrats have their shit together to win a presidential election? No, they don't. I wish they did. The Democratic Party is very much broken right now. So this idea that Democrats will win in 3 years, no, not necessarily. I hope, but I don't think they have what it takes right now. But also, this idea that if Democrats do regain the presidency, and notice he doesn't say the House and Senate, just the presidency, that what? They're going to magically snap their fingers and undo what Trump did? As a scientist, Jerry Coyne should know that's not how it works at all. You can't undo what they are doing right now. Because right now, scientists cannot study, they don't have the funding to study mRNA vaccines. What do you think is going to happen in 3 years if there's another outbreak, another pandemic? You can't just magically whip together the research in 10 minutes. At least the US cannot. We're not going to have the technology available. What happens if we don't address climate change now? It's going to get worse and theoretically irreversible. That would be bad. What if there's, and this has happened, some universities said they had to pause long-term research that had been going on because the Trump administration just cut their funding. If you end long-term, decades-long research, you can't just pick up where you left off in a few years. And since he talked about students, let's say there are grad students who want to study some of this stuff, but guess what? Too bad. Your department no longer has the funding to pay you a stipend to do your research. What do you think those grad students are going to do? Are they going to stay in the US, go to that school, study that field? No. Maybe they go to another country to continue their research and we have a brain drain in the US. Or maybe they switch fields because, you know what? I wanted to be a scientist. There's no future in it for me because I can't get the funding I need to study this stuff. I'll go into something else. So no, you can't just magically reverse the harm Trump is doing in a few years. So this idea from Coyne that everything is temporary is bullshit. It is permanent damage that is going to hurt all of us. I don't get how he doesn't know that. By the way, he's also criticized his critics, like me, because he said we didn't even read the damn book. But the thing is, and I've said this before, the one thing they released months before the book was published was the table of contents, and it turns out most of the essays in this book were published online somewhere over the past few years. And this is just a compilation of essays that are already online. So yeah, we can read those essays. We can read the content of this book, even if we didn't have a physical copy of the book with us. Like, how do you not know that? How is Coyne this bad at interneting that he doesn't know this stuff? So all of these people, they all have some variation of the same argument. Trump is bad. Sure, we acknowledge that, but the left is way worse. And look, we totally would have criticized Trump way more if we were writing these chapters today. But sorry, I turned in my draft 10 minutes before the inauguration happened. So how was I supposed to know Trump was going to be this bad? Here's a suggestion. Maybe you should have listened to all those progressives that you guys criticize instead of laughing at them and mocking them and ignoring them and blaming them for all the problems with science. Because I promise you, people on the left and progressives knew exactly what the Trump administration was going to do, and we knew it for years before he got reelected this time around. What do you think Project 2025 was? That thing came out in 2023. When I wrote about Project 2025, it was in 2023, and they said they were going to, they said the Biden administration's climate fanaticism will need a whole of government unwinding. They said the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which includes the National Weather Service, needs to be dismantled because it's one of the main drivers of the climate change alarm industry. They called for limiting access to abortion drugs by lying about its safety and efficacy. It said the CDC should stop compiling information about gender identity, basically because it legitimizes trans identities. They wanted to do away with vaccine mandates, and they wanted to prohibit research into vaccines because they claimed falsely that it used stem cells from aborted fetuses. Like, I knew that was going to happen 2 years before Trump came into office because that's what he said he was going to do. How did these professional scientists and science communicators have no clue about any of this? And if you don't know any of this, maybe that's a sign you should stop living in this right-wing bubble you are living in, where the biggest war on science are coming from like blue-haired college students who annoy you and professors who acknowledge a spectrum of sex, because guess what? That's what the science shows. Like, you could have written about the Republican Party's assault on science anytime in the past several decades, and it would have been relevant at any moment there because they've been doing this forever. And it's always been worse than whatever you think DEI is doing to science now. To pretend you had no idea this was going to happen is an admission that these scientists, these renowned scientists, do not understand what is happening in the fields in which they claim to be experts. And that's before you even mention Jordan Peterson. So here's my suggestion. Here's what they should have done when they submitted this book. If they submitted these drafts before Trump was inaugurated, and Lawrence Krauss says, don't worry, I added in a little bit about Trump. Here's what it should have said. The chapters in this book deal with dumb shit that annoys us, but it pales in comparison to what Trump is doing today. We are supposed to be experts in science communication, but we chose to focus entirely on why liberals are ruining science while barely mentioning what conservatives are up to. Shut up about it. We promise we will include some bits of Trumpy criticism somewhere, maybe at the end after the Peterson chapter. Anyway, let me tell you about my dear friend Jeffrey Epstein. That one's just for Lawrence Krauss. By the way, when I brought this up to Lawrence Krauss, or at least he responded to me on Twitter, this is what he shared with me. He's not a fan of mine. I guess you haven't read the other bunch of pieces I have written over the past year, or even the addenda I wrote in the book originally completed before Trump's election. If you looked at the book at all, you twit. Warning though, there are big words. You might need ChatGPT. Lawrence Krauss is calling me a twit because I told him his book is dumb. Because it is. So look, the war on science, it's not a defense of reason. It's like this monument to intellectual cowardice because these authors, all they have are these petty grievances about pronouns and diversity programs, and people don't respect them anymore, and people don't look to them for advice on what to do about science because for various reasons, this whole book, as I've mentioned in other videos, it's a collection of people who have been saying stupid things about trans people for years, or they have been canceled for being racists or sexist or creeps on campuses. Like they act like the biggest problem in science involved grad students asking for inclusion or professors acknowledging biological complexity or STEM scholarships going to underrepresented groups. And to publish this book now, I mean, if you're Lawrence Krauss and this book was written before the Trump inauguration, but it's going to come out like 8 months after his inauguration, why not just go to the publisher and say, look, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but I'm going to give you back your advance. We're not publishing this book anymore because it's not good. He's not going to do that. So to publish this book now in the face of the Republican sabotage against science, it's not just ridiculous, it's malpractice for these people who claim to be scientists and great science communicators. Like everyone involved should be embarrassed. I mean, and that's saying something if you're Jordan Peterson. Like every page wasted on performative outrage over wokeness is a page that could have been used to explain to the right-wing readers they are appealing to that there is a real ongoing destruction of the scientific world. And given that these authors have spent the past few years appealing to conservatives, like that could have been really useful. Instead, they're pretending that progressives are the threat to science, and these people are giving cover to those who are actually dismantling our institutions. So they created this book of propaganda for right-wing losers to use to further hurt the scientific world. Like, you're not going to be able to undo this. So these scientists are basically seeding the destruction of this field that they claim to love so much. All right, I'll stop there. Any other questions here? I know we're going forever, aren't we? An accusation from them is an admission. Very much so. Yeah. I don't have anything to add. Thank you for that donation, but I agree. I still don't understand what the fuck they mean by wokeness. It is slang for things that annoy them, like people calling them sex predators. That's what wokeness means, if you're Krauss. It's the left wing's fault the right is attacking them, like a big brother hitting you with your own hand and saying, stop hitting yourself. Good analogy. Yup, that's pretty much what they're saying. So the war on science isn't being waged by climate change deniers, young earthers, anti-vaxxers, etc. Nope. It's being waged by the scientists in laboratories who are like, we can do better than what we're doing now. Staying woke means staying educated in a changing world. I like that definition. That's very good.